Good evening, everybody. And tonight is Monday night, and it's Zoom In on a Fresh Conversation. Tonight, our special guest is soon-to-be author and therapist, Myron Nelson, and he will talk about depression and his upcoming book, which he will bring to us here on Zoom In on a Fresh Conversation when he's done, How to Be a Burden. Welcome, Myron, to Zoom In on a Fresh Conversation. Thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you so much, Donna, for having me.
Zoom In on a Fresh Conversation is sponsored by Eyeless Diamonds, LLC, brought to you by Milton McCulloch, author of Love and Emancipation, L.D. Robinson, owner and operator of Ladero Press. And I invite you to attend the Artistic Talk at the DeLand Museum, which is this week, Thursday, March 24th at 5 p.m., where we will be featuring Richland Ryan, who is a local artist. And we are so happy that she's going to be one of the first Black artists to be featured at the DeLand Museum, Miss Richland Ryan. So thank you for the opportunity, DeLand Museum. And if you have any questions, please email me at freshbookfestivals with an S at gmail.com. And if you have any questions for Myron, please leave them in the box below. And this conversation is being recorded. Good evening, Myron. Please take a moment and give our audience just a little background about yourself and particularly about your website.
Of course, be happy to. So I am a therapist here in Chicago, and I've worked mainly with depression and racial identity development for 10 years, just trying to make sure people understand more about depression, how to treat it, how to connect more people. But my book will be called How to Be a Burden. My practice is called Black Tie Therapy. And it started from a joke that I used to have with my friends that if I went to a black tie event, I wouldn't have to dress up because my dad is Black and my mom is from Thailand. And so I've been searching for a name for a while, looked online for a bunch of different things like how to name a practice, and it just kind of came out. So Black Tie Therapy is what I stuck with.
That's wonderful. I mean, that's very creative. So thank you for—
Glad you like it.
Yeah. It's very creative. I laugh every time I think about it because, you know, it's important that you put those two things together. And now it's part of your company. So yeah, congratulations to you. So Myron, we want to take a few minutes to talk about depression. When depression is genetic, how early in life do signs show up?
The earliest it comes up is when kids are as young as 3 years old. So people are kind of surprised by that. And to clarify, it always is genetic and the environment. That's why when kids as young as 3 years old can have depression, therapy and interacting with their parents is still what's helpful, like learning how to interact with their parents differently, learning how to talk to them differently, how to hear what their parents are saying differently. But it is as young as 3 years old. And it looks similar to how it does in adults, like feeling really low about yourself, isolating. Sadly, even 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds can have thoughts about suicide, and it can be scary to see. But that's why I really want to talk to people more about depression so they understand what it's like and it's not so scary. I also feel comfortable telling about my own history with depression and suicidal thoughts because I don't want people to think it's so taboo and so scary.
Right. And so did you have those thoughts at that age? Oh, really?
Oh, no. Not quite that, not that young.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So why and how do we miss the signs of depression, and why is it considered a disorder instead of a disease?
So some people will say disease. Some people say disorder, and you can see in research in both ways. But I prefer disorder because it's more complicated than something like the common cold. You know, cold is like you get an infection, your body fights it off, gone. Depression can stay with someone for a very long time. And we miss the signs because it looks like other diseases, it looks like other things. You know, like if someone gains 15 pounds, it could be depression, it could just be a change in lifestyle habit. If someone's not spending time with their friends and family as much, they could have depression, or they could be really focused on their work. So it can just look like other things happening in someone's life. So we don't really know what's going on inside someone's head. We don't know why they're changing the behaviors that they're changing. So it's very easy to just dismiss, maybe this person's sad, maybe this person's distancing from me, but maybe they're just going through some changes in life that I'm not aware of.
The thing is, I think most of us think of depression as someone who goes in the room, closes the door, doesn't want to see daylight, doesn't want to get dressed, those kind of very low portions of depression. But people walk around with it, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
mask it and in many different ways. And is the depression and disorder found to be prevalent in other countries as it is in the United States?
Yep, absolutely. Like I used to think that it was maybe something when I was in school and I was researching this, I was thinking, oh, depression is probably something that only impacts people who don't have as much. If you have less money, less resources, something like that. And so I would look up the research for, like affluent people, affluent countries, and it's everywhere. It can be 2% in some countries, it can be 10% in some countries, but it's everywhere. There is not a country I've seen in any research that has no percentage of the population with depression. It's because it's really, really deep in our genetics. The first documented case of depression is from like 400 BC. So it is much older than people think. It's not something that just happened in the last 50, 100 years because people are softer now or weaker now, which is something that comes up a lot when I'm talking to people about depression. And that's just not what's happening at all. I actually want to take a moment to explain kind of why depression happens.
Okay.
Because people don't really get some of it. So researchers started to look at similarities between people who are depressed and people who look sick. So let's say someone has, I should put it this way, people who are depressed tend to look like they're sick. Like they could have a fever or they have less iron in their body. These are symptoms that look like someone who's having a cold or something. And so researchers saw that there's a connection between the immune system and having depression. And so that means something is going on that's connecting our immune system response to when we feel upset and isolated. And that's just not what we thought before. So basically, when we feel depressed, it's a physiological response, not just a psychological response. That's why I'm sure if you think of someone who's depressed, it's not just that they are thinking differently. Like you said, they turn the lights off, they're acting differently.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's something that people don't quite understand. It changes all different parts of your body, your brain, gut, other things too.
Do you think we call it, and this is not one of the questions, but I want to ask it. We talk about it being environmental PTSD, right? And a Black male trauma, right? That goes through the ages, and that has a critical is a critical part of why a lot of Black men have depression. Do you believe that to be true? I mean, just the whole idea, and I'm just going to give you a for instance. So we moved to a community where I had to tell my son, don't go home this way. Mm-hmm. Always have your hands at 10 and 2. Mm-hmm. Take the highway, those kind of conversations that most non-melanin people don't have to have with their male children. And so from the time he gets in his car, he's traumatized, right? Till he gets to wherever he's going. And then whenever he gets back to the place that he calls safe. And so do you think that every day, if I walk into a grocery store, if I walk into a department store, is somebody looking at me, is all that part of what's maybe traumatizing and depressive to males?
Yes, but I think for a little bit different reason than you're alluding to. It's in part, so when you're teaching someone to respond to their environment like that, they're being taught and they're thinking about, how do I take care of myself? They're just saying, I have to protect myself in all these different situations. So they're on guard all the time. And that means that they're not thinking about, how do I reach out for help? How do I talk to someone else to feel better about the situation? It's because of the situation, they have to protect themselves. So the more men do that, the more we're not used to thinking about, oh, how can I get someone else's help in a situation? We just start to think, I have to protect myself all the time at all costs. And you do that for enough years and you stop knowing how to reach out for help. And maybe young kids don't even know how to do it that well either. But men especially start just thinking, I should regulate myself. I should keep my emotions to myself. I can't tell anyone about these things. I could be scared. I'm not going to tell anyone about these things. Because you're just taught get through the situation and protect yourself, not let me help you through the situation, or this is how you reach out for help if you're in a different kind of situation. And so I think women are taught more how to process and talk through something if they're going through a hard time. Men are usually taught more to keep it to themselves and deal with it themselves, feel better by yourself. And so I think that leads to depression and that leads to trauma because they don't know that how they're feeling is the same way someone else is feeling. They don't know it's okay to feel that way. And they don't talk to anyone about it. They don't talk to other men about it. And so I feel like there's this game of chicken with men all the time where we all feel the same thing, but we don't talk about it to each other. And we're really scared to be the first one to say, yeah, I was scared in that situation too. We just share comments and tips about how to get through a situation better.
Mm. And so you talked about in your writings that there are at least 5 to 9 things to recognize. Talk about a depressive episode that lasts 2 weeks or more and what that entails. I know there was, I think it was 5 to 9 things you had listed. Yep. Talk about those.
Yeah. So people usually just say someone looks depressed. They don't know what that really means. In order to diagnose depression, you have to have 5 of these 9 symptoms for at least 2 weeks. And so if you have them for a little bit less, that doesn't quite count as a depressive episode. So that's things like depressed mood, weight loss or weight gain, sleeping too little or sleeping too much, not being interested in the same activities you used to be interested in, moving slower, moving differently, moving more agitated, potentially, low energy, feeling worthless or really low about yourself, difficulty concentrating, and then thoughts of suicide or death. So of those 9 things, any 5 for at least 2 weeks counts as a depressive episode. And so if you take all those possible ways that someone could feel, so they could have low thoughts about themselves, be distracted easily, low energy, thoughts of suicide, and changing how they move. Those things for 2 or more weeks, any combination of that means that there are like 448 possible combinations of symptoms. Wow. That could mean someone's depressed. So that's why if I'm talking about someone, I say, oh, that person looks depressed. And I'm talking about someone else who looks very different. I say they look depressed. Both of them are both depressed by the symptoms of a diagnosis, but they can look completely different from each other. One person could be gaining weight, sleeping too much, and have thoughts about suicide. Another person could be losing weight, sleeping too little, and feeling low about themselves. Both of them look very different. Both feel depressed or are depressed.
So a lot of people say to me, well, I would talk to somebody if I could find someone who looked like me. Do you find that to be a barrier in people wanting to reach out for therapy?
Yeah, sadly, I would say it is. I think that there aren't enough male therapists and there aren't enough Black male therapists or therapists of color. And until that changes, until more people go to school for it, that is going to be something like a problem that persists. I hope that isn't, if men or people are trying to find someone who looks like them, who look like them as a therapist, I hope that doesn't stop them from reaching out completely. I hope, just like people who reach out to me, they'll say, I just had someone reach out to me today, actually, who reached out to me a year ago, and I didn't have space then, but I have space now. So being persistent about trying to find a therapist, and he met with someone else in the meantime and then reached back out to me. So to me, that's the best way to go about it. Yes, if you can find someone who looks like you, it makes it easier. But if you can't, that doesn't mean don't go to therapy. It means try to find someone else who fits and then keep searching. Because if let's say they did start with me and I had to take a break from therapy, something happens in life. So what, then now they don't talk to anyone? You never know what's going to happen in someone's life. So you have to start practicing opening up, talking to a therapist, because you'll probably anyone kind of goes through a couple of therapists. Sometimes it's not just one and done. And so it takes time to find a good fit. And so I recommend people, yes, it is a barrier, but I hope that it isn't a barrier that stops them from reaching out for help completely.
It is definitely a barrier. I think everyone pretty much that I've talked to says, I would like to go to therapy, but I can't find someone who looks like me or someone who would understand my plight or where that I've been, right? And so I think it really does stop people. What do you think? And I know I'm asking you questions I didn't have on here, but what do you think about internet therapy? What do you think about that?
Well, let me back up to the other question first, and I'll follow up about that.
Okay.
So I think when people are trying to search for a therapist who looks like them, they're saying, I don't want to have to explain certain parts of these things of my life. The downside of that is just because I look like you doesn't mean I'm going to have the same experience as you. In fact, Black men who are trying to seek me out as a therapist, I'm Black and Thai. I didn't have the same experience they did growing up. So people think, oh, if I don't have to explain this, this is going to make it easier. And it will in some ways, but it also means that they don't have to articulate themselves as well as they could if they're meeting with a therapist who's, let's say, a white woman who didn't have the same experience they had. That can be a benefit because they have to go above and beyond to articulate what their experiences were like instead of sugarcoating it or kind of just saying, you know what I mean? Like, oh, they're talking to me about something, they go, oh, you know what I mean? And I do know what they mean, but that doesn't give them the opportunity to actually explain what their situation was. If they were the only Black person in their work environment or meeting or something, I can know what that feeling is, but it doesn't mean I know exactly what their experience was. And we have to talk about the difference between our experiences and that. But to your question about internet therapy, I think it's pros and cons, just like anything else. I think the pros are that people who don't usually go to therapy or don't have the time, opportunity to, like I see people in downstate Illinois, I wouldn't be able to see them in person. That's when it's beneficial. Like people who just didn't have the opportunity before. But the downside is there is something missed in sharing the space with someone. Like I've met with people virtually and then met with them in person, and I felt different when I'm in the same room with them. I could feel like they were more tense than I realized. Like they were kind of just like tight all the time. And then I didn't know that though, talking on a screen. So I'd say pros and cons to it.
But I think there's a lot of that going on because us in the 2-year pandemic, really, and just trying to come out of it now, right? So let's talk about the cover-up, the medication of drugs, alcohol, aggressive behavior. I think most women find it hard to tell their men, I think you have a problem, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's hard to have that conversation. Tell us about how you have that conversation. Like, how do I
start with,
go ahead.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think it starts with not assuming that the person has a problem in the way you think they have a problem. Like it's actually asking questions and genuinely trying to figure out the answer. Do you think you have a problem with alcohol? This is what I'm seeing. You're drinking this many nights, this much each night. Is this a problem to you? Because you're if you start the conversation by saying, I know you have a problem and I'm trying to get you to see it the way I see it, that's not really a conversation. That's a lecture, just in disguise as a conversation. So the conversation is actually, what do you think about this? This is how I see it. I want to just know the different perspectives that you have compared to how I see it. Like I give the example sometimes about spicy food. Like I like spicy food. My wife does not like spicy food. So I have a lot more of it. So if we have something, she'll say, oh, is that spicy? I say, no, it's not spicy to me, but I know it's spicy to you. And so it's not objectively spicy. And so kind of the same thing with drinking or overusing drugs. Let's say someone's 20 years old in college, the amount that person drinks, and that's normal for them, would be considered alcohol abuse disorder if that person is in their 40s. You know, like it could still be if they're 20, but it depends on the social situation, the context that they're in. Is that normal for your friend group? That doesn't make it okay necessarily, but it doesn't mean that they'll see it as a problem versus if that same amount of alcohol is being consumed by someone who was older or different lifestyle, different social circumstance, that would be an issue for them. So sometimes 2 drinks can be too many for someone. Sometimes 8 drinks cannot be, even though like that would be pushing it, you know what I mean? But there's just a spectrum to say, is this a problem? It depends. I need to know how you think about it. I can't just come to you and say, this is a problem. I need to know how you think about it first.
But do you think a lot of depression is masked that way?
Right? Absolutely. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Because people, when they don't know how to have a relationship with other people, like they don't know how to be a burden, they don't know how to tell people about their problems. Instead, they create a relationship with some kind of substance, like drugs, alcohol, because then those things become the caretaker for their emotions. If I'm having problems at work, problems with my family, and I don't know how to talk to anyone about it, yeah, I might start using drugs and alcohol, because now every time I feel upset, instead of talking to them about it and feeling better, I can go use something and I'll feel better. And then I start to do that more and more often. So it's, instead of using people and using those relationships, I create a relationship with drugs or alcohol.
So in some school systems, they've started to do yoga to kind of calm the students down with a Zen kind of atmosphere, especially those who may be on certain medications. Do you believe that we are doing our children a disservice by not having some kind of therapy on the ground?
Of course.
Yes. I think yoga and those kind of things are better than nothing. So teaching kids to regulate their emotions with movement or something else is very helpful. But we do need more therapists, school therapists in schools in general, because other kids aren't equipped to handle some of the situations that kids are going through. And they don't know how to appropriately respond to something that someone's going through. And yoga probably isn't going to be the answer to a lot of those things.
Right, but it's a calming mechanism, I think, as opposed to going to detention, right?
Yeah.
So you have to go to yoga class. I'm going to, because I don't want I want to make sure that we can answer some of these questions. Let me just go to them really quickly. Hold on. One of the questions regarding suicide: why is the family shocked sometimes that the last ones to know that they loved were depressed?
Because usually people don't want to tell the people closest to them that they're having a hard time. That's why what I write about is teaching people how to be a burden, how to burden the people that you love, because being a burden isn't a bad thing. All those family members who are shocked want to know that the person that they love and care for is struggling. But the person who's struggling thinks that the last thing those people want to know is that they're struggling. So the reason no one really teaches you how to have that conversation. No one really teaches us how to say, I'm struggling and I need help. We just all say, I can't believe they didn't tell me. Like, they know I'm here, but we don't always reach out and explain to people, no, it's okay if you tell me, like, you are having a problem with drugs or alcohol, or it is okay if you're telling me that you having money problems, you've been gambling, you've been doing something else that, like, you feel scared to tell me about. If the family can be specific about what is okay, then people can actually feel like the door is open to talk to them about it. But if you say something like, I'm always here for you, or, I always got your back, it's too vague. And people don't actually think, yeah, you think you have my back in any situation, but really, if you found out how much money I've been hiding or how much debt I've been hiding, you wouldn't really have my back. And so that's why you have to be specific as a family member, a loved one, to say, I know you've been depressed and having suicidal thoughts, or if you've been having suicidal thoughts, you can talk to me about that too. Even like, that's all the taboo stuff people don't want to talk about. You can say, if you're having an affair, like, I will still have your back. It doesn't mean I approve of it, but, like, you can come talk to me about that. If you've been hiding so much debt, you can talk to me about that. If you've been hiding this physical illness, this, like, diagnosis you got, you can talk to me about that. But when we just keep it vague, people think you don't really, like, you say that, but you don't really. So that's why families are so shocked, because they're there in this big supportive umbrella safety net type way. But people need to know the specifics. They need to know, if I dropped out of college and didn't tell you about it for 2 years, you really are okay if I talk to you about it. That kind of stuff, that specific.
And okay, so when you're talking to someone about your situation, you're depressed, what I find is most people don't listen, right? You start the conversation and then all of a sudden they say, yeah, me too. Let me tell you about me. Right? So tell us how to be better listeners as friends and family members. I know one day I was on the telephone, I was talking, and I don't remember who I was talking to, but I thought, I didn't get my story out, right? Whatever that was. right?
Yeah.
Because
Right.
the other person said, oh yeah, me too, and gone, right? So whatever
Mhm.
my situation was disavowed,
Mhm. Yeah,
right?
and unaddressed, really you didn't get to share as much as you wanted
Right,
to.
exactly. So tell us how to be better listeners when uh, people are really trying to get across, or at least let them, anyway, tell us how
Mhm.
to be better listeners.
So the first thing I would say is when you're hearing someone talk about a problem, ask them what they are looking for in response. Because if you don't ask that, you're just going to be guessing what they want. So as a therapist, this happens all the time with clients too. Like I'll say, what do you want to talk about today? They'll explain what's happening. And I could just jump into something. I could just, like share a story. I could be empathetic. I
Right.
could give advice. Like I have a whole bunch of different options I can choose. So what's more helpful though is as a listener, you say like, okay, what are you looking for from me as you tell me about this? And they could say, I don't want anything from it. I just want you to hear me out. Or they could say, I want you to tell me it's going to be okay. Or they'll say, I want you to ask me questions about this because I can't think about this. I've been thinking about this for the last 2 months and I don't have an answer yet. Or they might say, I don't know what I want. And then the two of you figure it out together. But when people jump into their story, it's usually because they think that's what you want to hear. Like
Okay.
people think you want to know, oh, I've been through something like that. And this is how I got through it. This has been helpful to me. If I was you, I would want this information. So let me tell you this information. I don't think people are trying to be self-centered. They're trying to give you what they think you want. So if I said, Donna, I had a really bad day. My wife's been sick. I've been really tired. You might just respond the way you think you would want to be responded to. But that might be the exact opposite of what I want to hear. So you can ask as a listener, oh, what do you want from me in this moment? But as the speaker, I can also say beforehand, hey, I just want you to listen, or
Yeah, but
I
what you
want you to
want
talk
from me
about
at this
this.
moment is such a therapy way to say it.
That's
You know what I
true.
mean?
That's true. Let me make it more common, like make it more everyday.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
so what would you say? Would you say something like, if I said to that person, so what do you want from me? Say, I don't want nothing from you. You know what I mean? The attitude
Right,
might
right,
change,
right, right.
right? So tell us what we, in layman's term. I understand that you're a professional, but we
Yeah.
still want to try to keep the communication open when we have a colleague or a friend or a family member who's going through something. What is the engagement? What's the engagement words?
Sure. I think it will be different for everyone. And I think the way therapists talk can become more how everyone talks. So I hope that actually becomes more common. But
Okay.
you can't just say, oh, you want advice? Or I'm so sorry. I could give you advice, or I could ask you questions. Like, I guess you just have to figure out something else to say that gives them options. Like, I don't even want to give you the script because it's going to be about you and your relationship with your friend. Yeah, I don't want you to say like, I don't want you to be like, oh, okay, I hear you. Hold on. Like, let me look at what I'm supposed to say. It's not going to be like that. I want you to be engaged in that conversation with your friend or family, and that relationship. So how it can come across if you make a joke first, and then you lean into it like, okay, are you looking for advice? I have advice. Like, more about that relationship than I'm going to know about that relationship. So I'm going to challenge anyone who's in that situation to think about how would this person hear if I give them options? And then I'm going to try to find a creative way to give them some options. But I can't give you the script because like you noticed, I have the therapist version. That's how I talk to my friends too. So that's just how it is for me.
I think maybe something we could say is, tell me more about that situation, and so we can talk through it.
Yeah,
but listen, I never think of that in this situation.
But now think about it ahead of time,
right?
And have it locked in. That would be something that fits for you.
Right.
I think that would be good to say.
Like, tell me more about that day or your situation, and let's walk through it and see if we can make it better, right? But when you're on a conversation,
okay, that was good.
I know you never think of that when you're in a conversation. I'll have to write that down.
Write it down, right? I mean, like that's the thing. You, in the same way, if someone sees you say "bless you," like you just do it like that. Right. That's what those kind of conversation points can be like. If you have that in your back pocket all the time, you won't have to look back and know what to say. That can become a thing that you just say reflexively. Right.
Yeah, I think I'll write that down. So let's talk about environmental factors as they contribute to depression? I know you had quite a bit of writing on that.
So people tend to think only certain events, like these big horrible events that can cause depression, but it's actually in research really specific the kind of events that cause depression. So they have to be severe, like it can't be just a bad day at work. It has to be a little bit more severe than that. And it has to be irregular. And irregular means this is the way I think my life is supposed to go, and something went off in that path. So if someone loses a parent at 10 years old, that's very likely to cause depression. But if someone has a parent that dies when they're 70 years old, that's less likely to cause depression because people go, oh, that's the way life is kind of supposed to go.
Right.
But if any of that pattern kind of breaks, then that's going to cause, more likely to cause depression. And then if something is humiliating or feels inescapable, like if a kid is going to school and they're bullied at school, you have to go to school. Like most time you have to go to school. So if you're going somewhere you have to go and you're getting bullied there, that's more likely to cause depression because you don't really have an out from that situation. But it's this thing is going to be negative. When you go home that day, the next day, that bully's still going to be there. And it's going to be there the next day and the next day and the next day. So when you think about your future, you think, this is not going to get better. And that's when people start to get depressed. I don't think my future can be better than it is right now. In fact, it probably is going to get worse. Those are the kind of events when people start thinking about their future and they say, I think this is only going to get worse or at best stay the exact same. And there's no reason to hope then. That's when people feel really, really depressed.
In your practice, in your years of experience, if someone tries to commit suicide once, do they do it again normally?
Yes. I mean, so, like statistically and research-wise, it says that if you attempt suicide, that is one of the biggest risk factors for you to attempt again. And I think it's unfortunate because part of the reason I'm doing this work is because I want to decrease the number of people who attempt and complete suicide. Because if someone if they attempt, they're feeling so disconnected from the people around them and they're feeling so hopeless. And then on top of that, there's a stigma now. If you found out someone attempted suicide, you might think of them differently. You might look at them differently. So now that person's only further distanced from the people that they want to connect to. And so even when they open up about it, they're risking the chance of being alienated from the person that they're trying to get close to. So I think so many reasons compound on why it becomes a negative thing that increases the chance of someone attempting again.
It's disheartening. What type of, question, what is the gender ratio of your patients?
It used to be mostly women. And then since the pandemic, now it's mostly men. I think that is a change that's happening because the pandemic, thankfully, not that I want it to happen, but the benefits of George Floyd protests and people understanding, thinking about mental health more. So I'm glad it's happening. Yeah, now a lot more men.
And do we have the same issues? Or are they very, very different?
Similar, but the way it comes out is different. So it can be depression, like a man's depressed, a woman is depressed, but the way it looks and what they need to work on can be different. So for men, like I said, it's learning how to have a conversation where I'm sharing the hard parts with you, and then we're actually having a conversation about what's difficult, versus men are kind of trained to just give you reports. This is what happened to me today. This is what happened to me 5 years ago. The end. It's not a conversation. It's just a tidbit, a statement. And then I don't even want you to ask me questions about it. It's just a statement for you to have. Versus that's what I'll work with men on. No. We can talk about that statement for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Give me the details about that. Versus it tends to look more like with women, they know how to process, they know how to go back and forth about something that's depressing, but they don't necessarily, this is very general, it's not like everyone, but don't tend to know how to accept the other perspective. They feel like this is really awful and horrible and depressing. I don't think it's that horrible and awful and depressing. And we can disagree about it, but it doesn't seem like my perspective really seeps into the way that they think about it. They can talk about it more extensively, but it's harder to understand that someone else sees it so differently than they do. That's true for men too, but that's kind of like a basic difference.
And so when you talk about making sure that they know that the conversation won't be looked at gravely if they bring it up, right? I remember talking to, I have bonus children, nieces and nephews, and people that I brought into the world, right? But I gave them a correlation of Tony Curtis and Kirk Douglas and the trapeze, right? And always knowing that you have a net. And then when I hung up, I thought, they have no friggin' idea what I'm talking about, right? First of all, they have no idea about the movie. Second of all, and what's the net got to do with it? So how is it that we explain to them? Because I think all of our children go through depressive states now. We all do, you know, but maybe more now because the economy is, you know, hard. Buying your first house is hard. Children, you know, all that is, it was hard for us, but, you know, it's a little harder for them. So how do we explain to them that there truly is a net? I mean, without using my correlation of Tony Curtis. They have no idea.
I like what you're going for though.
Yeah,
using that, like it's,
so when I hung
it's
up,
not
I thought,
explaining.
she's still looking at the phone saying, what the hell?
Yeah,
but
it's, if you only use analogies that you're familiar with,
right.
they're not gonna get it. It's like I'm from Ohio actually, and if I gave you landmarks that just Ohio people know, you wouldn't know what I'm talking about.
Right.
So in order to explain something like that, you have to understand your kid's perspective, those kids' perspective. So before you try to explain anything, you need to understand what they're thinking about. And so it'd be, let's say 20% of the conversation is you explaining, 80% is you listening, to the point you can say, oh, I get what they mean. Now let me try to translate it the way I think. But usually that parents or people are trying to explain first, and then they're saying like, they don't get it, they don't get it. It's because you're not really listening to them. You know, like even just in the example, you're like, let me put this in my terms into their head. And they're like, I don't get that. They're like, I don't get that. You have to translate what they're saying to how you think, and then you can give it back.
Right. I did. When I hung up, I thought, she is still looking at the phone saying, what is she talking about? Okay, so I have to do better. Let's talk about the type of diseases often that occur simultaneously with depression.
So it's pretty much everything you can think of is correlated with depression. But the big ones are probably anxiety, heart disease, cancer, irritable bowel syndrome. Like it's surprising, but it's things that affect your body and brain
irritable
are much more likely.
Wow.
Yeah, because it's things that affect your immune system, your brain, your gut. Those are things that will impact how you perceive the world. That's what I was trying to say before, that there's a connection between when we're physically sick and when we feel depressed. Because what some theories say is that depression is a response to being physically sick. And if we can better prepare ourselves to fight against infection, some of those things come with depression. So it's kind of like depression is the attempted answer at fighting off physical illness. So that's why people who have all those kind of diseases are also very likely to have depression. Having a chronic illness is actually the #1 risk factor for developing depression. So if you are physically sick, you are much more likely to have depression, this disorder, because your body is trying to fight off this physical illness, and it creates all these different changes in your body. And then it comes with all the things that we know as depression, which is, you know, like going in a room, turn the lights off, feeling low about yourself. Because when you feel physically sick, that's how you feel. Like sometimes people will say, I'm surprised, oh, you're just depressed. Why can't you just go to the gym? But it's like, if you had diarrhea, why don't you just go to the gym? It's not easy to do when you feel physically sick. You can't just go do those things. Depression is more like that than people realize.
So now that you brought up exercise, do you believe that exercise does help with depression, or does it have to be a combination of exercise, medication, and therapy? And all those things have to be intertwined.
It's best if they're intertwined, but individually, changing your diet helps, exercising helps. But the best combination so far is therapy and medication. And then to me, therapy and exercise, changing your diet, lifestyle changes, because the physical stuff will improve how your body feels, and that can improve how your mind feels. But the interpersonal things, how to talk about your problems, if you can talk with people about the stuff that's stressing you out, and they can help you feel better, your body will also feel better. So it's a feedback loop. You can either take care of your body and not help your mind feel better, or you can take care of your mind and your body will feel better. Because I know you've been in a situation before where you talk to someone and they helped you feel better. You know, like even the fact that there are terms like heartbroken, worried, sick, it's, I have this relationship, and because something is wrong in this relationship, it's physically impacting me. And so if we can heal the relationship, you also actually feel better physically. But the opposite's true too. If you feel better physically, you can also heal your relationships. But that's why I'm trying to teach people. People know how to exercise, or kind of know how to exercise. People know how to change their diet. People don't know how to talk about problems. That's why I'm trying to teach people. Talk about the stuff that bothers you often and early.
And so some of the medication, I'm told, causes erectile dysfunction. So is that why most men don't want to take it, along with high blood pressure, or they don't want to take those medications because of that?
I think it's all the side effects and the social stigma against it. But if you're going to ask someone who's really depressed, would you rather be not depressed and have erectile dysfunction? They would say yes. Like most people like don't want to be depressed. Like it's like, do you want to feel awful about your whole life? And there's one area that's bad. Yeah, I'd rather do that.
We can deal with that. Just take your medication, right? Exactly.
Right.
There are ways to get around it, but most men don't really feel that way.
Yeah.
So
many other things,
yeah, so many other things. So let's talk about your book, How to Be a Burden, which we cannot wait for you to complete, and talk about how communication is so important, and talk about what types of communication is necessary.
The reason I titled it How to Be a Burden is because so many of my depressed clients would say, oh, I have to talk to you about this stuff. I can't talk to my partner about it. I can't talk to my dad about it. I can't talk to anyone else about it because I don't want to be a burden. Like I don't want to burden them. They have so much else going on. And the type of communication I'm talking about is telling people about the stuff that's going on in your life that's stressing you out, or it's making you feel depressed, because other people do want to know, especially if they can help. They just don't want to be overburdened in a way. So I don't know if you've ever heard the comparison of if someone's has their car broken down on the side of the road and they're just asking for help, trying to weigh people down, less likely to get help than if they're pushing their car on the side of the road. And someone might say, oh, you're pushing your car, clearly you're broken down, I'll come help you. So it's not that people don't want to help you. They just want to know that you're doing a little bit yourself so that they don't have to do all of it. So if you're telling someone about a problem, you have to say, this is what I'm doing for it, and I just want to let you know, or this is what I'm doing for it, and I want your help in this way. Because people are happy to know about the problems. They just don't want to do all the lifting for you. They don't want to, no one wants that. Like someone just comes to you and says, like, this is the problem, you fix it. No one wants that. But if you know that that person's already doing something about it, people really rally for support then. So that's a consistent thing.
Being still in Women's History Month, and I have my own ideas about history, and that there would be none if it wasn't for women.
Absolutely.
Exactly, there would be no history. But and his story is really our story. But the relationship a woman has in the protection mode of her family, does that keep her from seeking therapy because she has to protect everyone else? And that's kind of, the sphere that she lives her life in until she's bottomed out. Right?
Yeah,
okay.
100%. I actually really like the way you put that, is because I think as we're taught to grow up, it's just the older you get, the more independent you're supposed to be. So you work your way up, the older you get. Oh yeah, I don't have to, I don't need other people's help. I can take care of this. And in fact, not only do I not need help, I take care of all these other people. So how could I need help if I take care of all these other people? But it's really that it never ends. Like we should always be getting help from someone else. There's no top of the pyramid. People do think I'm supposed to be the rock. I'm supposed to be the one people turn to. So how can I ask someone else for help? And I think that I know that stops people from asking for help or seeking therapy. So what I encourage people to do is, no matter who you are, you need help with something. Usually though, people will pay someone or they'll watch a video online instead of asking someone in their life for help. So it's kind of like they're trying to find this backdoor way to getting help. And they tell themselves like, no, it was still just me. I didn't need help, but really we go around some other way. I read a book about it. I watched something about it, but that's not me really getting help. That's just me, using my resources or something like that. But no, that's you asking for help. Everyone asks for help for something. There's no one that's done anything significant without someone else's help. Just because you help everyone else in your life doesn't mean you can't be someone who gets help too.
Let's talk about the techniques you use for how to be a burden.
There are a lot of techniques. That's why I'm writing the book. It's hard to explain in this context. I'm just gonna
Just give
put
me
it into
five.
one. I would say if you're talking to people about your problems, tell a story, because people know how to listen to stories. You can't just say, I'm depressed. People don't really know how to respond to that. You have to give them a whole kind of context for it. When did it start? What was happening in your life? Where did that come from? And how are you feeling about it now? Give them like a whole story arc. Or you can give them directions when you're talking about a problem. This is what's going on for me, and this is what I want you to do, like we talked about earlier. I want you to do this. I'm going to tell you the problem. Now, or you can use analogies to help people understand. You can say, if you don't have the feelings, like the words for it, you can say, like, it feels like I'm drowning. You don't have to say like, I feel upset and depressed. You can say like, I feel like I'm drowning. I feel like I'm in quicksand. I feel like I'm buried under all this work. Like, use analogies and metaphors to explain your problems if you can't quite find the way to describe it to someone. But most important is just early as possible, start talking about a problem, like when it's really small, because people try to think that they can handle it on their own. Then when it's too big, they don't know how to explain it. So it's start talking about it when it's really, really small, so that by the time it becomes something bigger, you've already been telling someone about it for a month or years.
Right.
So start early, because sometimes, like, I don't know if you've heard stories of people who win the lottery and then go broke after a year because they don't know how to manage money. Just because you have $1 million doesn't mean you learn how to manage money.
Right.
So if you can't manage money with $50,000, you're not going to know how to manage money with $1 million. So you have to practice money management as a skill before you just get it. So talking about your problems, talk about it when it's small. So by the time you have something big come in your life, then you know how to talk about it because you've been practicing this for a long, long time. Versus people usually don't practice and they hope, oh, by the time I would need help with something so big, of course I would reach out. But that is not what happens at all. People just haven't learned how to reach out for help for years.
Right.
And then something happens to them and they still don't know how to do it. They'll be in a conversation with someone and not know how to say the words out loud. I guess I want more technique that would help is say it out loud to yourself first, because you need to know what it sounds like to hear the problem. You just hear it. It's just your voice, but just hearing it back. And then practice saying it to someone. If it's about someone relationship, practice saying it to someone who's not that person. And then you can eventually move on to actually saying it to that person. But so say it out loud first, say it to someone else first, and then say it to the person you need to say it to.
Okay, so you're saying how to be a burden, but how do you do that when it's a work environment? Like, okay, they have overwhelmed me, right? I am not the super Black woman at work and they give you everything, right? So how do you have that conversation with the person that you report to?
Yeah.
That's a little
it's
more
harder.
difficult.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a lot more difficult. Yeah. I think in
Like,
the way
dude,
you
don't give me no more work. You can't do that.
Right. Yeah, just like that. Just shut it down. But I think that it's the same thing. It's start early, because then that scenario that you're painted, it doesn't really happen if you start early. It's that when we try to pretend to be, like superwoman about it, then we have to take down this image that we built up is, yeah, I told you I could handle it all, and I really couldn't handle it a year in. But if you start off by saying, oh, I can do this, but I can't do that. So it's being a burden early on and saying like, yes, I can do this. No, I absolutely, like knock it out. That I'll be great at this, but I'm going to say no to this. But if you say yes, by the time you can't, now you look like you were kind of just, like it looks messy then. But if you say no early and you do a great job on the stuff you say yes to, then that moment doesn't come. So saying no early on makes it easier to say no when the big stuff comes. So it's doing it as early as possible. The moment you get on the job, know what to say yes to and know what to say no to. If you are forced to say yes to everything, then that's just a bad work culture. That's a whole other thing.
Right. It's just a whole nother thing. Right. And so I was way too old before I found out that no was a complete sentence.
Yep, it is just no, period.
No, period. Right. And I think that a lot of women put themselves in depressive situations because we don't say no, period.
Mhm.
We may say no, no, maybe.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
Or,
not right now.
No, not right now. Or let me think about it. Right. As opposed to just plain no. It's a complete sentence. Right. So all the ladies on board tonight, no, it's a complete sentence. We're allowed to say that. Whether somebody likes it or not. I know I missed a lot, and I don't want, I told you 1 hour. I know you got family to go to. So did I miss anything that we really should touch before we say goodnight? Is there anything else that maybe you want to leave with us? Well, I do want to know when the book is going to be done. We can get to that next.
Okay, we can get to that. But I would say what you just said is actually the part I want to focus on is people don't say no as a complete sentence because it makes the other person uncomfortable. It's learn to make other people feel a little bit uncomfortable. That is not a bad thing. People used to think that, oh, I want to be in a relationship where I don't fight at all. But that's not a good relationship. A good relationship is you can fight a lot. You can fight 5 times a day, but it's how quickly do you make up? How quickly do you heal from that? So if you say, no, I can't do that at work, that person's going to feel uncomfortable. But what happens next? You say, do you want me to help you find someone else to do that? Or I'll say yes to the next thing because I can't say, I have to say no now. It's make people feel a little bit uncomfortable because that's when real relationships develop. It's kind of like muscles or an immune system. It has to have some pressure to be a good relationship. All the people you're closest to, I'm 100% sure you had a bad time with them. You had a rough time with them. You either went through something bad together or there was something in your relationship that you fought and argued about and you made up. If we try to live our lives by just not making people uncomfortable, we're not actually connecting. You're not having real relationships. You're just having these one-way dynamics where you're supposed to be good to everyone. And that's not a real relationship. It's okay to make people a little bit uncomfortable. You don't have to make people really uncomfortable, but a little bit is okay. That's really good for a relationship.
So I do have a question I missed. Talk about the suicide rate that nobody wants to talk about. What does that look like?
The suicide rate in the world and in the US specifically is you're about twice as likely to kill yourself than to be killed by someone else. But everyone's so worried about homicides. Like, oh, I'm so worried about like someone attacking me and getting killed. It's you are twice as likely to kill yourself than to be killed by someone else. So we should be much more concerned with mental health above like a security system. It should be, am I taking care of my mental health? Am I reaching out to people when I need help? And people don't want to talk about it because it's harder to talk about. We don't, like, even though so many people attempt suicide, we don't know how to talk about it as a society still. Like I that's why I feel very open talking about my depression. I was depressed when I was like 15 years old, tried to do a bunch of different things, finally kind of worked on this part, telling people about my problems and talking about it. But before that, I had suicidal thoughts. I didn't know how to talk to people about it. But now I can very much say like I had suicidal thoughts because I went through this depressive episodes. But I talk about it to you just like I got a cold because I didn't wear a jacket outside. It was cold outside. It's like this happened. This is the result of this other thing happening. Suicidal thoughts will come if you don't talk about your problems, so you isolate yourself and you don't take care of your body. Suicidal thoughts will come, but people don't know really how it happens. So they want to talk about being afraid of getting attacked or killed by someone else because we can wrap our head around that. Yeah, someone might want something from me and they might attack me. It's hard to wrap your head around. I can not talk about what's bothering me so much that it will make sense to my brain to attempt suicide. People don't know how to think about that. We don't know how to talk about it. So that's why I'm trying to talk about it more often.
And people don't understand that your body has a natural rejection to killing yourself.
Yeah,
it's not an easy thing, right?
No.
It really is not, because it goes straight into survival mode. Right?
Yeah.
So you really have to you have to really want to die. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
You really have to really want to die, because your body will help you survive if it can. Right. So
absolutely.
And to the audience, if someone kills themselves, they really try to kill themselves because their body will help them not kill themselves.
Because that's why I hope people understand how badly someone must feel in order to even attempt suicide. Like you're saying, your body does reject against it. That means that
It
person
does.
feels so awful, so confused, so hurt that they don't even know how to reach out for help. But that means that they're feeling really, really, really awful. And people still, I don't know, they judge it. Even, I don't know if you've heard the terminology is more now trying to say complete suicide, attempt suicide, not as much commit, because commit comes from the idea that it's a crime. Like it's still technically a crime in I think every state, but it's, you know, it shouldn't be viewed as a crime. Like it should be viewed as like I needed help.
And your
We just don't know how
insurance
to talk
won't
about
pay for it.
it. Yeah, it's awful.
Right, it's awful. It's just awful. And then I'm gonna let you go, I promise. But next week we're gonna talk about being behind the walls in gated communities, right? And how men and women behind bars have depression like you cannot believe. And there's so much suicide in these we call them gated communities, that people don't even understand, because it's statistically they don't tell you what they really died of, right?
Right.
When most of them are hanging themselves or shanking themselves, or it's just awful the way the outside world treats them and how we treat them, right? And so so we're going to go next week again and talk about depression behind the walls. We talk about it, you know, in our society, but what about the people, the millions and millions of people who are behind the walls? So anyway, tell us when the book's going to be done.
That is to be determined. I'm pitching to publishers now, but if I don't find something I like, then I'll self-publish by the end of next year at the latest. But right now I'm pitching to publishers, trying to go that traditional route. But if not, I want to get this out sooner rather than later, because so many people need to know this information, that talking about your problems can save millions of lives. People don't realize it's such an easy, free solution for suicide and depression. But that's why I need to get this out sooner rather than later. So to be determined, but soon.
So anybody have a quick question? I don't want to keep him too much longer. You can type it in the chat box real quick. Anybody?
No, I just enjoyed what I heard. You know, I saw a lot of myself in the discussion.
Okay, Nettie, thank you for joining us.
I think I'm gonna get my husband to join in next week.
Oh yeah, please do.
Good.
It will be a good conversation.
About this. I have a friend in I think she lives in Atlanta area. Kind of Facebook me this you know, I'm finding out about mental health because
There's so much too.
Yeah, because I have you know, some anxiety. That's what the doctor tells me. You know, when you did, I just heard myself in a lot of the discussion, which kind of like energized me a little bit. You know,
so now you know to get some therapy. Right?
Talk to people about it.
Loud, right?
Do something about it. I can do something about it, like health-wise, exercise.
Yeah.
You know?
Thank you.
Wow, it was good.
Thank you, Nettie. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And so, Myron, we ask our guests to give us a pearl of wisdom before they leave. If you would, please, sir.
I would tell people, learn how to do something, not just what to do. That's why people often know, let's say, I need to save money, I need to lose weight. People know what to do, but they don't think about how to do it. Break it down into pieces, make it as small as possible. However long you think it's going to take, double that. And is it okay if it takes that long? Probably, but take your time to do it. If you want to do something new, it's going to be confusing. You're going to go a little bit forward, a little bit back, but take your time to figure out how to do something. Don't just figure out, this is what I need to do, and I need to do this now. How are you going to go about doing it?
Thank you, Nettie. So, Myron, you know you have a publisher online already. So, and we have plenty of other people in our tribe that can help you get your book published. So really think about that. You know, I'm part of the Fresh Book Festival. So we have editors, we have publishers, we have everybody who can help you when you're ready to put the book together. And thank you
Thank you.
all for being here. Myron, thank you so, so much. I think we'll come back to you because I didn't get all my questions answered. So maybe
I'd be happy to come back.
yeah, so maybe in April or May, we'll have another discussion. And thank you for being on Zoom and on a fresh conversation. Thank you, everybody. Good night. Night, Myron.
Good night.